At 14, I was an end timer. I believed the world was on the verge of collapse, that the government was controlled by satanic forces, that we were living in the final days of Revelation. I was surrounded by grown men who were preparing for civil war. I was being groomed into their ideology, taught that I would have to take up arms in the name of God, in the name of righteousness, in the name of the last good men standing against a corrupt world. But I wanted to be a good soldier of God. And to do that, I needed to truly understand His Word. I needed to do something most of them had never actually done. I needed to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I needed to see the truth for myself. My grandma gave me a big-ass study Bible during this time, and by the time I finished it, I was an atheist. People always say that the best way to create an atheist is to tell someone to read the Bible, and they're not wrong. But it wasn't just the contradictions, the brutality, the incoherence. It was the realization that none of these men, these so-called warriors of God, had actually read it either. They weren't following scripture, they were following a script, a nationalist death cult wrapped in religious rhetoric, using the idea of faith as a bludgeon against anyone who dared to question it. And when I stopped believing, I became the enemy. Imagine being 14 years old, surrounded yourself with people who were stockpiling weapons, training for a holy war, waiting for the day when they could cleanse the world of unbelievers. Now, imagine that at 15, you suddenly realize you are now one of the unbelievers, and they know it. I didn't just lose my faith. I lost my safety. I lost my place in the only community I had. I started getting death threats from grown men, men who had once called me a brother in arms, men who had once told me I was one of the awakened ones. Now I was a traitor, a heretic, an agent of the enemy. And when you are that young, when you are surrounded by that much certainty, when you have spent the last couple years believing you are part of something bigger than yourself, being cast out feels like death. But in some ways, it was also liberation. When you lose your faith, you don't just lose your belief in God. You lose the entire framework that made sense of the world. I didn't just stop believing in heaven. I stopped believing in purpose. If God was a lie, then what was left? What was the point? What was I supposed to do with this life that had no grand narrative now? Most people never experience a true existential crisis. They never have to stare into the void at 15 years old and realize that every answer they thought was real was nothing more than a story. But I did. And for a while, that void consumed me. This is the first time I had to truly ask myself, what do you do when there is no greater meaning? What do you do when life is just life? The summer between 9th and 10th grade was spent searching. I tried everything. I dabbled in obscure religions, in cults, in ancient mysticism, in New Age philosophy. I was desperate for something to fill the hole where my faith had been. I didn't need God, but I needed something. I needed a reason to wake up in the morning. I needed a purpose. One of those cults introduced me to something I'd never considered before. Radical life extension. The idea that maybe the reason we seek immortality in religion is because we should be seeking it in reality. That maybe death itself is a disease. That maybe the grand meaning of life isn't waiting for us in the afterlife. It's something we have to build here in this world. The moment of realization didn't happen overnight, but slowly I began to understand something that changed my life forever. The lack of meaning is not a curse, it's freedom. The fact that the universe does not assign us a purpose does not mean life is meaningless. It means we are free to create our own meaning. I had spent my whole life, up until that point, trying to find the real truth, the one answer that would make sense of everything. But there is no one answer. There is no universal meaning. And that is the most liberating thing I have ever learned. I didn't need God. I didn't need a holy war. I didn't need a cosmic battle between good and evil to give me purpose. I was free. Free to think. Free to question. Free to build. The moment I let go of the idea that meaning had to be given to me was the moment I became the creator of my own meaning. And I chose hope. I chose progress. I chose a future where we do not live in fear of an afterlife we cannot prove, but instead dedicate ourselves to building a world so good, so just, so abundant that we don't need an afterlife at all. Between 15 and 16, I lost everything I thought made me who I was. I lost my faith, my community, my certainty. And for a while, I felt like I had lost myself. But sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from finding the right answers, but from learning that you don't need one. The world is not waiting to give us meaning. It is waiting for us to create it.